Welcome everyone. I was going to play a tune today that is an old tune and maybe talk a little bit about maybe why it's a good tune. It's a tune that all of you will know, and it's called Cooley's Reel. And I was just thinking, I just ran in to throw a little bit of rosin on my bow to give it a little bit more grip, and I was realizing, I guess I've been always doing this. I had a bunch of rosin. I hadn't cleaned off my fiddle, so I cleaned off these strings now before I started, and I think I always have cleaned off the strings just so that it's kind of a smooth glide when I play. But lots of people put a lot of rosin on their bow and might leave it also on their strings and indeed on their fiddle because they like the sound of it. They like the grittiness of it. I've just always gone for smooth. So I just cleaned off the strings, just put a little bit of rosin then on my bow, and have been thinking about Cooley's Reel and why we like it. So I'm just going to play it through once in a fashion that we all play this tune. So here we go. So undoubtedly, most of you play it the same as me there. And so I think there's a lot of things that make this a great tune. Of course, it's in E minor, and it lands very happily on the flute or whistle. It lands very happily on the fiddle, and indeed on the accordion. So kind of it's a good key. And it doesn't go down too low, so it doesn't mean that the flutes or the whistles have to do any jumping around. And but I also think there are some things about the notes in it that make it a winner in the Irish music world. So a little about that. This phrase I always think is a great one. This idea of going. So that thing of doing that repeat there, I think in and of itself is part of the charm of this tune. Well, you have to see if people agree with me, but I know there are other tunes that do that, and it always is kind of nice. It's it could have gone somewhere else, but the fact that it goes back on itself there, and then actually kind of sort of goes back on itself again. So it's going. Right? So there's a nice little play there. Maybe there's a word for it, I'm not sure. But there's this nice little play of going back to this phrase, and I don't know, is it almost like it's a little bit syncopated or something? But I think it's part of what makes it likable. And then the other part of what makes it likable is that there's lots of repeating. So let's see where the repeats happen. So we've got this first part of it. Then we've got a second phrase, and it gets into another nice Irishism, which we all like to do. Now we come back to the first phrase. And then we go up. And then we have an ending, and it's a strong ending. Now think about that. It's a really nice, strong melody in there. When we come to the second part of the tune, let's see where the repeats happen here. So there's our first phrase. Notice we didn't do what we do in the first part, and I think that actually is kind of cool that we don't, or maybe we kind of do. Da, 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 da. No, we really don't. Our second phrase, or I should say the third and fourth measures of the second part, go. Now we come back to the first phrase again for the fifth and sixth measures. Slightly there, and then the ending from the first part. So maybe part of the reason that it's so accessible, that so many people learn it, is that it just makes all kinds of sense. And there's enough repeating that it isn't too much of a challenge. I know that sometimes people would say, well, Liz, your tunes are difficult, although I think maybe my early tunes are difficult, mostly because I was trying to do something different for my fingers. Those were the days when there weren't so many CDs coming out, or LPs at the time. There was just once in a while. So you'd be dying for new tunes, and when I was making up tunes, I think that a lot of times they had a lot of turns in them, meaning that maybe I'd have a first phrase, and maybe I'd go into a second phrase, but maybe the third phrase would not at all refer to the start of the tune, and then it would have an ending, and then maybe in the second part, it would be completely different, and it wouldn't use the ending from the first part. And I think that's when we start talking about a tune being hard, never mind that it could be leaping around a lot more than this tune, and also going down, of course, into the lower registers, which I can't help. Love it down there. Yeah, I think it might be an interesting thing to look at your own tunes that you've written and see where you're going with it, or what are your favorite tunes, and do they have something like this pattern to them? I think it might be interesting to try the pattern out, but it also might be interesting to break the pattern, which of course you can do actually with this tune. So I won't tell you how to change Cooley's reel, which, by the way, the story that I know about Cooley's reel, Joe Cooley lived in Chicago for a good while before he moved to San Francisco, and is from Galway, Peterswell. And Seamus Cooley, his brother, did live in Chicago for a long time, all the time that I was growing up. And I don't think either one of them told this story to me, but I heard it from somebody in Chicago, is that this tune happened when the two brothers were coming home from a dance or a ceilidh. And I think somebody had played a tune, which might have been the first part of this tune, which they did have. So they both had it. I think they were on the bike together. And but they did not remember the second part. And so basically, I think they pieced together a second part between them, and came up with that. That's the story I've heard, unless you've heard something different. And yeah, so it's kind of nice. And there again, you had Joe Cooley on the accordion, you had Seamus on the flute, and the tune really works for both instruments. But to open your ears, as I've told you before, it can always be interesting to, number one, change the key of this tune that is so familiar to you and that you always do the same things to. So it's here. And it's nice that the first notes, well, at least for the fiddles anyway, you're going from an E to a B. So if you want, you can really actually climb up or climb down your fiddle, because it's always going to have that little fifth move. So if I were going to play this in other keys, I might be here with that original. I could try. And yeah, and if I went down, I could also go. Yeah, and I think when you go around your instrument like that, of course, it only makes you a better player and able to play with anyone. And it can just sonically sound so different. I met a musician at a session last week who was saying, listen to this version of this great old tune, and played an old tune and just played it in a lower key. And he says, isn't that a great version? And I just went, yes. But version, no. New key, yes. So it's interesting. Of course, within all of those, there might be a chance for a roll that there didn't used to be. There might be a chance for a triplet with your bow that used to be with a roll. And so just ornament-wise, it can be really good to switch keys. And so, yeah, and then other than that, I should say too that the other great delight in the Irish world is just the ornaments. And so you can choose to play this tune as plainly as possible. Another nice thing about Cooley's reel is that, yeah, you could just go ahead and play it right there. With just one grace note, as you saw there. You can decide to be very flourishy with your left hand. And those are just with grace notes, rolls. Right? And then, of course, with the bow, we can do right, so I'm just picking little spots and throwing 2 16th notes along the way. I shouldn't say triplets. Some of the spots were triplets, and some of them were just nice little 16th notes, like here. And then you just, if you haven't put those kinds of things in tunes, you just take it at a nice, easy pace. Let's say that. And you can speed it up. Then you can mix it up with your grace notes and your rolls. And this is fun. And finally, I just wanted to play a little tune that I wouldn't have played for you before. This was a tune that was done early in the pandemic, and it's a slip jig, and I wrote this for some friends in Barrington, Illinois, the Pfaffs. It's Bruce and Deborah, and they live on a farm. They live on a farm that's called that they call Whimsy Hill. And Whimsy Hill was a nice name for this tune, which is a slip jig. And just in case you'd like to put a new tune under your belt or just try to learn this one, I'll play it slowish, and then I'll play it up to speed. And we'll finish that way for this week. So there we go. Be sure to let me know if there's anything you would like. Otherwise, my goodness, we've covered a lot over the last, it's over a year. So if there's anything about composing or any kind of sharing you'd like to do, please let me know. So here is Whimsy Hill. Have a good week, everyone.